What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao with the news here on TaiwanPlus. Taiwan's legislature is once again at a standstill as controversial legislative reform bills go in for the third and final reading. The bills have caused widespread protests from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party within the legislature. Tiffany Wong is following this story for us from the legislative building. Tiffany, what's going on the floor today?
Well, it's another hectic day here in Taiwan's legislature as lawmakers from the Democratic Progressive Party attempt to prevent these controversial legislative reform bills from passing. Now, the Kuomintang and Taiwan People's Party are trying to use their combined majority to push through with business as usual and get this bill through its third and final reading. Now, if passed, these bills would expand the legislature's oversight of the executive branch. And the DPP has been calling this process and the bills themselves as black box, even comparing them to the Sunflower Movement 10 years ago when KMT legislators tried to pass a bill that would have allowed Taiwan to increase trade ties with China. Now, earlier we spoke with a DPP legislator who had this warning.
The Sunflower Movement in the past resulted from procedural issues, prompting many people to stand up. We should avoid repeating those mistakes. The KMT should be well aware of the cost we ultimately paid.
But the KMT says that they are following standard procedures and that the DPP actually used these same tactics to pass another bill in the past when they had a legislative majority. And they're also pointing out that their camp plus the Taiwan People's Party earned a majority of the votes when combined in the election earlier this year. And so therefore, they actually represent a majority of public opinion, whether the DPP likes it or not.
So what has been the response to all this? What happens if the law passes?
Well, there have been protests around the country led by civic groups as well as legal scholars and academics, and they've become collectively known as the Bluebird Movement. And here in Taipei, people are already gathering outside the Legislative Yuan. By the organizers' last count, it was 5,000 people. Now, last Friday, they also had a huge crowd of 100,000 people, and we're expecting to see a lot more come out once they get off work and school later in the day. Now, the DPP has said that if this bill passes, they will pursue constitutional interpretation in an attempt to block it from going into effect. But this clearly marks the start of a rough 4 years in office for DPP President Lai Ching-te, who faces not just one, but two unprecedented challenges, including maintaining the popularity of his party for a third term and winning over a divided legislature.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was our reporter Tiffany Wong live from Taiwan's legislature. We'll be keeping a close eye on this story as it develops. Now, to find out more about the controversial bills and the protests that they've sparked, Rick Glowert spoke with Brian Hugh, the editor of New Bloom magazine.
So you've been quite vocal about these reforms. Could you tell us what the objections are?
So there are two levels. One is the means by which they were passed, in that this is seen as violating the norms of transparency that the legislature should adhere to. So the phrasing is often a black box, that there's not a clear review process for experts to weigh in, and it was just rushed through. There's also discourse then that the DPP, while it's a minority, doesn't mean that its rights should be trampled over entirely, because it's not such a large majority that the KMT and TPP have over it, but also then one needs to take into account opposing views. And then apart from that is the question of the bills themselves, that they are seen as allowing for prosecutorial powers that then legislators could weaponize, use to target individuals they politically don't like, or even to target, for example, companies and force them to reveal their trade secrets. And there are a number of legislators that they themselves have business interests. And so it's feared this will be used for political corruption.
The main opposition parties are saying that these reforms will bring greater checks and balances for Taiwan's legislature. So aren't they a good thing?
The way it's framed in this way, it's packaged then as providing oversight and allow for greater checks and balances. But the criticism is that this, in fact, gives the legislature the power that is currently reserved for the executive branch of government. And in some way, this seems to be accommodation to the fact that the KMT is having difficulty winning presidential elections. And so instead of trying to craft a compelling political platform to win the next election, you seek to arrogate some of the powers currently for the executive to the legislative branch of government. And in this way, then, the question is, would this also interfere with judiciary powers? Because if then legislators have prosecutorial powers, then that seems to blur the lines between the different branches of government.
It's highly likely that all of these measures will go through, as the main opposition parties do have a majority in the legislature. You being at the protest, where do you see this protest movement going if the bills do go through?
So that's a very good question, because the DPP could seek a constitutional interpretation. The executive branch could raise issues with the bill, and then that might lead to some further space for discussion, or rather mobilizing protests against the bill from the perspective of civil society groups. There's possibly that Lai, as president, could veto the bill, but there's not really a veto power in Taiwanese politics. He could do that, but then just goes back to the legislature within about 2 weeks. And so it is a question of what happens. And if the KMT presses through, then this amplifies anger regarding them. It's unknown if civil society groups will try to escalate after that, because the focus now is on not escalating, that this is peaceful, and that process should be adhered to. And civil society groups have maintained that rhetoric so far. But it's to be seen if people are angry enough to take actions or take matters into their own hands, such as occurred with the Sunflower Movement 10 years ago. And I think that's one of the bigger questions with the protests, because they have grown to such a size that has not been seen in 10 years. But would there be an attempt to, for example, carry out a form of direct action? And the organizers have emphasized there's no plans like that currently, but who knows what would happen in the future.
That was Brian Hugh, the editor of New Bloom magazine, speaking to our reporter, Rick Glauert. The death of 2 firefighters has put renewed focus on firefighter safety in Taiwan. As John Van Schwest reports, firefighters themselves have different views on whether more can be done to make an already dangerous profession less risky.
A memorial to firefighters Li Yongzhen, age 39, and Zhou Lixin, age 34, both killed in the line of duty Sunday. They were found overcome by smoke in the stairwell of a high-rise apartment block in the northern city of Hsinchu. They'd gone back in to rescue residents trapped in a fire, but ran out of oxygen. Firefighters' oxygen tanks make a warning noise when they run low. Firefighters also carry an alarm that goes off automatically if they stop moving for too long, helping their crewmates find them. There are even firefighters posted outside burning buildings, ready to go in should firefighters inside get into trouble. But none of these precautions saved these young firefighters. And they aren't alone. It's the second time in 5 years Taiwanese firefighters have died after running out of air. Some firefighters say there's no way to make rules about oxygen use, as everyone's lungs and hearts are different. Each firefighter needs to get a sense of how quickly they use up their air, something they develop through training.
我们平常有做空气呼吸器的训练，你自己的体能跟你自己的耗气量，你自己能把握的话，你进火场你安全就可以自己去掌控。
But others say the problem is that there are many other standards that are lacking, or that can be totally different between different local fire departments. And this, they say, creates unnecessary risks and the chance of fatal miscommunication.
到底要怎么样去监听无线电？我们该监听的内容，我们该记录下来的内容，怎么样才可以帮助到真的发生状况之后，最快去救援到这个人，或是在管制的时候，我们可以比较早知道这个人发生状况，这样子。对，其实这个都还没有一个共通的语言在。
Firefighters groups want the government to be more proactive in forming new policies to prevent unnecessary deaths, setting common standards where they're needed, and reforming policies before more firefighters die in the line of duty. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The nuclear envoys of the United States, South Korea, and Japan are condemning North Korea's latest attempt to launch a spy satellite. They say Monday's launch violates UN resolutions and threatens regional peace. North Korea was trying to launch a second military satellite, but the carrier rocket exploded in midair. Pyongyang says the launch was part of its military modernization plan to have 3 more spy satellites in orbit by the end of this year. There's international outcry after an Israeli airstrike killed at least 45 people sheltering in tents in the southern Gazan city of Rafah. That airstrike also caused a fire, injuring hundreds more people. The blast was in an area that the Israeli military had previously designated as a safe zone for displaced Palestinians. It has drawn global condemnation, prompting protests in New York, Paris, Madrid, and across the Middle East. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu labeled the strike a tragic mishap, saying the military did not target civilians. But he has vowed to continue the country's offensive in Rafah, despite calls from a top UN court to halt operations. Some of Taiwan's biggest celebrities are expressing support for unification with China, just a week since President Lai Ching-te took office. Wesley Lewis looks at why those artists may feel pressured into making these statements now.
我们中国人嘛，来北京一定吃烤鸭的，还要吃什么呢？
我们中国男生最热情了，对吧？
Towing the line, pop star Jolin Tsai and rock band Mayday are the most recent Taiwanese celebrities to refer to themselves as Chinese in front of cheering fans in China. Several other Taiwanese celebrities also shared online posts supporting unification and decrying Taiwanese independence on Chinese social media platform Weibo. These celebrity statements have triggered a heated debate in Taiwan.
有一点本末倒置，蛮不喜欢的，会影响对他的观感。
可能他们有他们的为难吧，不会不支持，对。但是我觉得那个就是个人的想法。
Taipei Mayor Jiang Wan'an says people have the right to their own opinions, and he wouldn't stop the singers from performing in the city.
我们是一个民主自由的国家，台北市更是一个多元开放的城市，我们怎么可能拒绝他们来演出？
President Lai Ching-te also urged Taiwan's public to show compassion towards the celebrities.
在别人的屋檐下，我们的文化工作者讲什么内容固然是一回事，但更重要的是他们内心想的是什么。我们应该给予谅解了。
Beijing views self-ruled Taiwan as part of its territory, and its new president, Lai Ching-te, as a dangerous separatist. The celebrity public statements and reshared posts come just a week after his inauguration, and the artist might have been pressured to make political statements.
Public figures such as celebrity or pop singer who come to develop their career in China will have to make the public statement that they will have to support the final reunification of Taiwan to the motherland. So it also highlights that the William Lai, the Lai Ching-te, who just inaugurated a few days ago, his remark was considered to be more provocative and try to seek the formal independence.
And this isn't the first time Taiwanese artists have made similar statements denouncing Taiwan independence. Analysts say it's part of Beijing's mission to convince Taiwan's public that independence is out of the question.
One Taiwanese female singer who developed her career in South Korea, her name is Zhou Ziyu. She was accused by the Chinese netizen as well as Chinese authority to hold Taiwan's national flag. So she was forced to make a apology, public apology, formal apology.
China's entertainment industry is projected to be worth nearly $500 billion by 2027. It is the biggest market for many of Taiwan's artists. Some have even moved there, and others might genuinely identify as Chinese. Which means, with big bucks on offer, these performers might not be the last to come out in support of Beijing's claims to Taiwan. Klein Wong and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
A Thai lawmaker has been sentenced to prison for defaming the country's monarchy. Chonticha Janru of the Move Forward Party, that's a progressive opposition party, will serve 2 years behind bars. She was found guilty of defaming the monarchy in a 2021 speech demanding the release of all political prisoners. And in that speech, she mentioned the monarch's power to control palace wealth. Criticism of Thailand's monarchy is taboo and can be punished by up to 15 years in prison. 1,800 people in northwestern Indonesia have been evacuated after the volcanic eruption of Mount Ibu. Local authorities are clearing a 7-kilometer radius around the active volcano after it started spewing ash 6 kilometers into the sky on Monday. The eruption comes during a period of heightened volcanic activity in Indonesia, which has 127 active volcanoes and sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Thanks for joining us today for What's Up Taiwan. Grab our app to get more of our stories on your mobile device. Finally, we head over to Hong Kong, where a Doraemon drone show lit up the skies over Victoria Harbor. I'm Eric Gao. Take care, and we'll see you later.